Hello and welcome to the Nature Unplugged podcast, where we are all about inspiring wellness in the digital age. Let's get going. All right. Hello and welcome to the Nature Unplugged podcast. Super excited for this episode today. So we at Nature Unplugged are, of course, huge proponents of farming, gardening, and knowing just how important it is to be connected to where your food comes from and your food in general. And today we're excited to be speaking with Javier Guerrero, President and CEO of Coastal Roots Farm. Javier has been doing some wonderful work in the community for a number of years now, and we're going to dive into learn a little bit more about his background and all the awesome things going on at Coastal Roots Farm. So Javier, welcome.
Yeah.
Cool, man. I'm going to read your bio because I think it's important context. So Javier is the president and CEO of Coastal Roots Farm. Javier works with farm staff, board members, funders, partners, and volunteers to advance the farm's impact initiatives of regenerative agriculture, equitable access to food, and environmental education in Jewish life, welcoming all backgrounds. Javier has worked in the San Diego nonprofit sector for over 20 years and brings extensive experience in nonprofit administration, organizational management, and resource development. Prior to joining Coastal Roots Farm, Javier served 8 years as executive director of San Diego Children's Discovery Museum in Escondido, overseeing the museum's capital campaign, moving to a new location, and expansion of exhibits and programming. Javier currently serves on the board of North County Philanthropy Council and Carlsbad Educational Foundation. Javier was the recipient of the 2021 Fran Aleshire Leadership Award from CSUSM Leadership North County. And yeah, man, I know you've done a lot of wonderful work. That's a lot of stuff, but really appreciate you being here.
Thanks for having me.
Cool. Well, I wanted to start just getting to know, I read your bio, but wanted to hear a bit more about your background, where you grew up, and could you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, born in Mexico City, came to the United States young. My formative educational years were spent in Seattle, Washington, where I went to a school called Orca, and thus the whale. And it was, this is in the 1970s, and it was just very early kind of progressive education. This is before the real advent of like charter schools. And it was really committed to the arts, and learning and being outdoors was a huge part of that, through, I would say, like being outdoors and the arts. And so that's really the environment that I learned in. Later on, I think academically in certain ways might have presented certain challenges.
Right.
And I had to ramp up as I transitioned to other schools and moved to other places. But I think what that instilled in me was well, first of all, the deep personal connections to people, and how we learned how to interact with each other, how we learned how to problem solve. Any topic of science or learning, we would go outdoors and do something. And then it was always like this arts and creative, whether it was through visual arts, music, performance. And really kind of, I think in many ways, it's only when I really stopped to think about it, to be honest, that I'm like, wow, that really set a foundation for me for the rest of my life. And so, getting into experiential education, which we'll talk about later on, I think I'm a product of that.
Yeah, that sounds like an incredible school. And I was going to ask, like if you had any particular place in nature that you really connected with. Was it kind of in around the school, or was there like a different place that you connected with as a kid, and how that impacted and inspired you?
Well, as being in the Pacific Northwest, I think my some of the strongest memories were exploring the beaches, to be honest, like, you know, the huge driftwood and the rocks and just like this rawness. And I remember we build like these kind of sculptural playgrounds out of like fallen wood and driftwood and rocks. And it was, everything was just kind of really raw, very elemental, you know? And I think probably even, you probably see it, you've been to the farm, you probably even see it in some of the design and the stuff that we do there at the farm, just, you know, very, very simple design using basic elements of wood, metal, stone, and that sort of thing. But yeah, I would say definitely, and I've always had this connection to the ocean my whole life. And I think that's also carried through as well. Experiencing the ocean, not just there, but like up and down the coast, around the world. And that's always been a deep connection.
Yeah, no, it's so wild as you say that. I have a cousin who lives in Vancouver in Canada, and we've done a few surf trips to Tofino and that kind of zone on Vancouver Island. And it's such a, I mean, I love the ocean here. It's so amazing. And it's such a different experience up there with, like, you have literally the driftwood is sometimes like entire trees, you know, it's just so crazy. And the mountains and, you know, potential for orcas and wolves and bears and all this stuff. It's incredible.
And I think, you know, and also, you know, grew up very much outdoors, very much camping, you know, backpacking from an early age. You know, I was in Scouts, I'm an Eagle Scout, I'm outdoors with my friends. You know, we grew up young in the time of like early survival type movies and shows and stuff. So we like that idea of like, you know, being in a middle school age and thinking and wanting and actually going out and kind of doing semi like survival camping when maybe some of our other friends were doing other things. It was, and then, you know, my scoutmaster, he you know, he was World War II vet, and, you know, he spent the extent of the war in the jungles of Burma and, you know, fighting alongside the local indigenous people, the Kachin. And, you know, it was like, just even there, like how we learned how to camp and how we learned how to be in nature. It wasn't like with fancy gear. Like,
You're not going to the REI garage sale.
No, you know, which was really interesting because later on, as I, you know, got older and actually, you know, University of San Diego and familiarity with, you know, outdoor adventures and my friends and stuff were also like, we would camp on our own and we'd have more like our tech gear, I would say.
Right.
But like when we were camping with the troop, it was like it was very, again, elemental, and you just had to know how to be with, you know, an axe, a knife. You know, we always open fire. Like you know, it was never, we weren't using fancy camping stoves. You had to know how to make a fire in the rain anywhere, and just kind of be, you know. And I think that like mentality is carried through just how I kind of work through problems. And even in my own job today, like, you know, I was always educated with, you know, don't bring me problems, bring me solutions. You know, as young people, he expected us to kind of figure it out.
That's incredible. Yeah. Sounds like such a wonderful blend of experiences from the school to your scouts, to your friends. That's really cool. And then, so what brought you down to San Diego? Was it going to the University of San Diego?
Well, University of San Diego, my family here, you know, you know, my parents separated, remarried. And so, you know, my high school years were actually in Texas.
Okay.
Yeah. And I've got roots in, you know, from Mexico, and then my mother's family on the East Coast, Buzzards Bay on the ocean, where I spent my whole youthful summers on the water and in the water. A lot of sailing, grew up a lot on the ocean. Just kind of different places. That's why later on I studied anthropology, because like I just enjoyed traveling and peoples and places and understanding different lived experiences. But yeah, San Diego, so University of San Diego, and then there studying anthropology.
Okay.
And, you know, quickly connected that found that some of my people, right? You know, when you go to college, you're trying to figure out like, you know, who's your community.
Who's your crew?
And I was really fortunate to find, you know, this outdoor adventure program where it was like, I came in and just immediately like valued my experience and my background. But then my job in college was also, I worked at the Mission Bay Aquatic Center. Okay. So I actually taught, you know, actually my paying job was like teaching sailing, sea kayaking, surfing, and then taking people like on trips and excursions and that sort of thing. So that was super cool. And that just became a big part of my world during college, aside from like, you know, surf trips down to Baja and whatever.
That's awesome. Yeah. I remember that now that Sonia and I worked at Outdoor Adventures or were involved with them in grad school. And I had forgotten that you were part of doing that stuff in undergrad. That's super cool. And I'm sure it's different people when we were there, but it's such a cool community and it's an amazing group.
Yeah. No, that was I graduated 95. So it was like 91 to 95 is when I was there.
Okay. Awesome. Outdoor Adventures. Yeah. Terreras. Okay, cool. So studied cultural anthropology. And then how did you get into the world of nonprofits and working in that realm? Was that something you always wanted to do, or was it?
You know, definitely interesting there. I mean, so when I was I'd say big activity that I did kind of connected to school, partly not connected to school when I was a grad is, you know, growing up, and I remember even in Washington State and actually in Washington, even going up to Vancouver as a kid, really loved like the natural history museums, anthropology museums, archaeology museums. I didn't even really know if I really understood what that was in its entirety, but just really fascinated also like a visual art background. So I like studied studio art. I actually got accepted to RISD, Rhode Island School of Art and Design. And I originally was going to go and do studio art as college, but then I wanted to go to a 4-year liberal school. And so when I got to the University of San Diego, you know, and I already knew Balboa Park, but I was just walking around and I walked into the Museum of Man, now called the Museum of Us. Mm-hmm. And I just walked in like within the first couple of weeks of school. And I said, hey, is there opportunities to volunteer here? And they said, well, what's your background? And I said, oh, well, you know, I have an art background and also I've done a lot of, you know, kind of building, kind of construction stuff as well. And they're like, great. Well, you can volunteer in our exhibits department. And they said, oh, by the way, you can get college credit for volunteering. They said, where do you go to school? And I said, oh, well, the University of San Diego. And they're like, oh, we have interns, you know, you can get college credit for that. And then I went back and I talked to my professor and found out that yes, in fact, I could get credit and volunteer and get this experience. And it was purely out of the passion and interest of it. So now I'm in this anthropology museum. I'm working with collections. I'm working with the people there. And now I'm like helping to like build and install these exhibits. I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. That's awesome. So actually my nonprofit experience really kind of started then as a freshman in high school. So I interned there off and on throughout college. And so when I was finishing my master's degree at Northern Arizona University in applied cultural anthropology, they actually had contacted me and offered me a job.
Oh,
they
wow.
had an opening, and I was planning to work in international health development in Latin America, where I traveled 2 years after college, kind of traveled, working, backpacking throughout Central and South Mexico, Central South America. And I thought, like, I'm going to Latin America. I'm going to spend the rest of my life in Latin America. But they called me and they said, hey, you know, we have this job, and would you be interested in being adjunct faculty at the University of San Diego? So actually, I came back to San Diego as adjunct faculty of anthropology, museum studies, and curator of Southwest collections, and later on curator of North American collections in the curatorial department. And then I did a business program at UCSD in business management. And then at that point, my predecessor was retiring and then stepped in as director of operations, deputy director of the museum. And then, so I just, that was over 8 years of growth. And so, essentially when I left there, I left kind of purely in what were essentially executive director and development type roles.
Yeah.
And that's been the career since. So it's just kind of, it was weird, just kind of like launched into that. And I thought, hey, I'm going to try it out. I came to San Diego. I actually was living on a sailboat on Harbor Island. And I thought, I'm just going to work there for a couple of years, pay off the boat, take off, go sailing.
Yeah.
And here I am like 21 years later.
You got sucked in. Okay. That's wild. It all started with the, I love that. Just kind of strolling around Balboa Park and popping into the museum one day.
Yeah.
Look at that. Okay. So fast forward a number of years and now you're at Coastal Roots, CEO of Coastal Roots. We've been there for, is it just over 3 years? Is that right?
Yeah, just over 3 years.
Okay. Can you share a little bit about Coastal Roots and the mission and what y'all do?
Yeah. So, what's interesting and also connecting to my backgrounds and interests, so previously, Children's Discovery Museum, this indoor-outdoor space, experiential education, art, science, world cultures, and had the opportunity to really kind of help grow that organization and not just expand the impact, but the reach and the scope of what that could be and building out the space and whatnot. So with Coastal Roots Farm, I think was pretty exciting is that here's this organization with such a strong establishment, focusing on regenerative agriculture, equitable access to food, and equitable access to environmental education, and also this element wrapped around of Jewish life. And that notion of Jewish life is really kind of this organization that's guided by a Jewish lens and values. It's not a religious organization per se, but really connected to these traditions, which really is then inviting people to connect with their own traditions from around the world about how we care for the land, how we care for people, how we care for animals, how we not waste. So as a value-driven person, I would say, tying all these things together, and that the space is effectively all outdoors.
Yeah.
And it's like this outdoor education program, experiential education. And then with that interest, where also I had pivoted and worked for a while in health development and providing people with food assistance, with organic fresh food grown on the farm. It was like all these things were like converging in this opportunity that I really could not have seen coming had I tried. I never said, I aspired to work and be on a farm.
Yeah.
But it was like, it's just been a dream. It's been such a great place to be, touching the lives of so many people in so many ways. And, we just, in the last year during COVID, we were fortunate enough to not only be open and running, but we were in the critical sector. So we were providing food to those in need, direct service. So, we're not, kind of taking food from grocery stores and redistributing and that sort of thing. We're growing the food, organic, nutrient dense, and providing it directly to these pockets of underserved communities. And, I just to see how our team rose up to that in the moment, we never stopped a day. And then also from the education standpoint, even more so during COVID, families, they just wanted to get outside. They wanted their kids to get outside. Right. And so we pivoted, we scaled back our summer, that first summer coming in, in COVID, we pivoted, we had these small pods, they allowed camps to happen. So we were doing these outdoor camps in small pods. It was awesome. Kids were just so excited. Families were excited for their kids to get out. And then we pivoted from there to a new program with an after school farm camp that we ran throughout the year. which was extremely successful in terms of meeting the needs in the community. And then we had our summer camp this past year. So even during COVID, because of our food production and bringing on our food forest, we actually saw like our food production double. And I would say, the number of youth that we were able to serve in the last year also doubled.
Wow.
During COVID. Right?
That's nice.
And so it's, for us to just be positioned to do that. And we're just still a young organization. We're only in our 7th year now, but the scale of what took me 8 years to do, say at the Children's Museum, we effectively ramped up that in terms of our staffing size and our scope of offerings and what we're doing. We've done that just in a couple of years. And it's huge. And so I think this is going to be another macro year for the organization and for the community, because we're really just getting ramped up. We just hired up 3 more full-time educators. So we have a team of 5 full-time educators. Okay. Along with a number of other part-time and on-call educators. So we're programmatically, farming-wise, we're ready to push. Yeah. It's amazing. And I want to add, kind of on a personal note, that Sonia and I, or Team Nature Unplugged, several years ago, worked right near the farm at the Hive. And that's how we connected with you. And it was really amazing. We weren't super involved, but just to see the space is incredible. And it was awesome to see all the different things you're doing. So you probably shared all this, but you're growing food, right? Growing organic food. So providing food for people that can't afford it. And then there's a huge educational component. So camps and things like that. And then you do events. Does that kind of cover the different? Yeah, I would say the probably in the buckets would be the school and group programs. Okay. Pre-K through 12th grade, the farm camps, both after school and seasonal. And then our community programs, huge bucket, big agricultural festivals, events, programs throughout the year. Those are probably the main things. And we have our new addition to the program offerings, which will soft open. So take this with a big disclaimer, open the end of this month, is that during COVID, and this is something you haven't seen because we've done it in the time that you've been out, we've built out this space that's over 9,000 square feet, an extension of our education, farm, and garden program spaces. We've built out a new nature play outdoor space. Oh, wow. And we're planning to open that for a kind of daily visitor experience. Currently, if you're not coming to the farm stand, or you're not coming to a regular existing program, or, we also do birthday parties and events and stuff like that too. But a camp or a school group visit or something a schedule type something, or volunteering, because people can sign up and come to volunteer on the farm. So if you're not coming for something that's kind of prescribed like that, there isn't really a daily kind of experience. And so we're going to start with just Thursdays and then kind of go from there, probably Thursdays and then add on Sundays and then go from there. But yeah, this is going to be something that's overseen and supervised and programmed by our education team, but it'll be a outdoor, taking back to the beginning of our talk today, kind of outdoor in nature, open experience, play, but then also facilitated kind of programs throughout the hours that we're open by our educators, where they'll, explore the gardens and different topics, they'll, engage with the chickens, they'll learn about different aspects of the farm and different activities, or maybe even, some, even around, maybe connecting, reading a book, but then now we're going to go experience something together. And so that, and, the space, just to paint the picture of it, it's outdoor seating, these raised planter boxes, beautiful, huge open space as you come in. We're building out a teaching kitchen right there.
Okay.
You go in, there's these huge logs that we brought in and assembled like a big toy set, but we did it with a forklift and chainsaws.
Okay.
And a tree house going around the tree. We've got a real John Deere tractor that somebody donated. Currently building out this huge like farm stand, like play farm stand area, mud kitchens, an outdoor nature loom, outdoor instruments and music. That tree house is actually like an environmental field station. So it's like where kids are going to be able to kind of explore and learn about all these different elements of nature. There's an outdoor stage that we built where a lot of other activities will be happening. So, and a lot of the wood, the big wood for the fence that we built, which we planted out with passion fruit. So it's this living fence wrapped around the space.
Wow.
It's all, and a lot of the sitting logs and the climbing structure, it's all urban wood that would have otherwise gone to the landfill. That we partnered with Lumber Cycle and Tree San Diego, and so it's all that part of it's been built out of like repurposed urban wood, as I mentioned, that would have otherwise kind of gone to the landfill or had some misuse, we'll call it. Repurpose. So again, that goes back into those values I was talking earlier about not wasting, access with dignity, in terms of being able to come to our farm stand, which by the way, I didn't mention the farm stand, it's pay what you can, $30.
Yeah.
And so also, we'll make sure that and then also our school and group visits and camps are also scholarships, opportunities. So making sure everybody can come. And then with the nature play area, we'll also put in things in place to make sure everybody can have access to that as well. So, again, we want to offer these things, but we don't want to put up barriers. Nature is not something that it's kind of like, anybody can go. Well, you need a board per se, but you go surfing, but anybody can go for a hike. Anybody can be out here. It's something that needs to be accessible, should be accessible. And then, but I think what'll be good about like this space is I think a lot of families and even children don't know how to be comfortable in the elements. They don't know how to be comfortable outdoors. And I'm not talking about going backpacking. I'm talking about just literally, being out in a more kind of raw elemental space.
Yeah. I mean, this is very exciting. There's so much alignment, right, with what we're all about and what you all are doing. And I think I'm excited. And just having been to the space prior to this, it's going to be called or is there a name for it? The day play nature area.
Well, I always work with kind of functional titles. They're not probably the most exciting titles, but like, it's been for the longest time, it's been called nature play, which nature kind play. Of, okay. It's just what we call it, nature play, which, sometimes I just like titles that explain exactly what it is, because you're not like questioning that. So it's going out and playing in nature, experiencing.
Totally.
Nature.
I love it. And I think that you touched on this, that it's so important too. And a lot of the folks that we see, it's not necessarily about going completely off the grid for several days on a backpacking trip, but just getting that kind of daily interaction with plants and with trees and with things like that. And so providing this space in a relatively in an urban environment for people to do that is really, really amazing. I wanted to ask, can you share a little bit about, you mentioned this, I know the numbers are awesome for getting youth out to the farm during COVID, but can you just talk about like some of what you've seen from the kids that come through, whether it's the camps or some of the educational programs, like how it's benefited them, how it's impacted them and the families?
Yeah, for sure. And we do, we do surveys, we do evaluations, we kind of track that information. And we definitely get really, really nice responses. I think maybe just a couple things to say in terms of, I think we find that comments about children who maybe are a little bit more reserved, a little bit more introvert. When they come to the camps, when they come to our programs, they tend to be more expressive, more outgoing, more engaged. I would also say that it's been really nice when we've had youth through different programs that maybe they're somewhere on the spectrum of autism or, learning, and having like either parents or teachers say, wow, we've never seen so-and-so kind of open up this way and engage, and just participate, and be excited and be happy and be laughing and be outdoors. And I think that's probably one of the more powerful things, if you're not, it's like same as an adult, if you're not open to the experience, if you're not open to learning, if you're whoever, whether it's your employer or your teacher or whoever, has not kind of created a space where you feel like you can do what you need to do, it's really hard to learn. It's really hard to perform. And I think, being outdoors, I can tell you that, for every family, every child, every guest that comes to visit the farm, it's so often I hear people just say like, wow, we had somebody over yesterday and they were just watching the chickens. They were like, this is so relaxing, I'm just like,
yeah,
I have not been this relaxed in a long time. And I'm just sitting here because they stopped and they were just observing and fascinated and really pulled into the moment of watching these chickens. And it's like, it's like doing, some activity, or like, as you're surfing and you're focused on the wave, and that's just everything else goes like this, and I think that's what happens when people go into nature. It allows them to kind of like push some of that noise in their mind, in their life out. When kids are also in our programs, there's no devices, like we've got a little row place where they put their backpacks. Yes, they have their phones or whatever, they're there. Our facilitators, educators have radios and phones on them. They can be readily contacted, and it's just, maybe that's even kind of like a forced, stop for the kids, right?
Right.
They're, coming into these programs, whether it's a, camp, all day camp or whatever, that they're really, and to be honest, as we know, I think as adults, we need that too.
Yeah.
We need that forced stop and just to put it away,
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I'm talking to you and mine's right here next to me and it's on silent, but, you get those calls, and it's like, but
I just, on a similar note to you, I'm totally with you that adults need it too. It's so funny. We do, whether it's educational stuff or different talks. It's so often that we talk to parents and they're like, well, I'm totally good with my device use, but my kids, and then and you talk to the kids and they're like, I don't think that's not really the case. Do you do any, is there any stuff that's explicitly for adults? Any programming for adults?
We are going to be adding more program. I mean, obviously the volunteer opportunities right now. I mean, you can come, with your kids and whatnot, but a lot of times the adults, it's adults participating in that kind of hands-on farming, gardening, volunteering experience. We are going to be actually in this year bringing in more workshops and programs that are scheduled. Part of that's also been like a staffing thing in terms of like building up our team. Yeah. And now that we have a more robust team and the capacity to offer that, and then also looking how we could even, partner with some other like-minded individuals, organizations who can come in, and like other organizations that I've worked with, we kind of bring in and they can help facilitate some activity program. So it's, it's aligned with what we offer, but maybe we're not the ones directly offering.
Right.
But very much looking at our own program and offering. But something else I wanted to mention, just in terms of that pause and kind of pulling it back to this notion of like, which we haven't gotten into much of, this idea of like a Jewish community farm, right, again, and this idea of like, what does that mean? In terms of agriculture, you know, a lot of those traditions and how they're connected, you know, in ancient times, every 7 years, it would be a Shemitah year. And so this year that we actually, in the new calendar that we just entered, is the Shemitah year. And the Shemitah year is a time when, you know, especially for agriculture, that you would let the land rest. And there's this idea within regenerative farming, like we do, of like, you don't want to overwork the land.
Right.
Just like, you know, in those values that I mentioned, there's this notion like, you don't want to overwork the animals. You don't want to overwork the farmer. You've got to kind of keep things in balance. And the Shemitah year kind of really reflects, it's like a time of rest, you know, it's a time of pause. And so, you know, some of the programmings and things that we're offering and doing, like lean into that. You know, it's also during Shemitah, it would be a time of like forgiveness of debts. Mm-hmm. It would be a time of kind of returning the land, and in that kind of land acknowledgement, you know, so, you know, we acknowledging, you know, where the farm sits, and Encinitas, traditional lands of, you know, local Kumeyaay and Luiseño indigenous peoples. And just kind of how we, you know, some of our food distributions are going out to support tribal elders, you know, how we're bringing school groups from indigenous tribal communities to the farm. All these connections and reflections are all kind of tied to these values. Right. And in this Shemitah year, it really is something to be said, I think, also for kind of the ethos behind Nature Unplugged, is this notion, you know, of Shemitah, which could be kind of cool and something to look at, because the very notion is about like disconnecting and again pulling back. And it's a time when people wouldn't plant, they would have their perennials and their crops that were kind of like growing throughout the year, but they wouldn't like plant new fields and plant new crops. And so they would be letting the land rest. You're still essentially, you know, feeding yourself, and you have to have food, right? But this understanding and care of the land, and how caring for people, caring for the animals. And also it was a time where people could, you know, gather in community, and do that, which maybe even in this last year of COVID, there was a little bit more of that, right? Like people were kind of really reconnecting in different ways, and disconnecting in different ways.
Yeah, that's really cool. I appreciate you bringing that up. The Shemitah year. Yeah, I mean, it's really wonderful too. Just bringing in that ancient wisdom to, and I'm thinking about even too, it's not necessarily related to Judaism, but you're bringing in your background in the Pacific Northwest and more of that kind of just like, there's wisdom there, which is like the basics of camping. And I think what I love about what you all are doing, and I'm learning more, is bringing a lot of that ancient wisdom, whether it's Judaism or, you know, Javier's ancient wisdom.
Well, it's interesting. You think about the potlatches, you know, in the Pacific Northwest, and that was like, you know, like nobody should have too much, right?
Oh no, I don't. Can you say a little bit more about that? What's the?
Well, just the potlatches, the ceremonies, the traditions in the Pacific Northwest, within, you know, the indigenous communities of that area, you know, traditionally, like these gatherings, there would be like a time, you know, for those that have kind of amassed, we'll call it wealth within, that could be food and other goods and these things. And there would be a lot of, you know, giving and redistribution of wealth, right? Okay. And there is wealth based on whatever was valued kind of at that time, right?
Yeah.
And that sense of like caring for community, and And I think that, I mean, again, there's a lot of traditions around the world, again, between cultures, religion, of, how you care for others. And, within, within Judaism, there's a lot of ways and terminology for how one gives. And it's really beautiful, from like the idea of, giving with the intent of receiving something, which in anthropology we talk about in terms of reciprocity, right?
Yeah.
But the ultimate form of giving, and again, you see a lot of deep philanthropy in within the Jewish community, but the ultimate form of giving, just in general, that I think we would all agree, is if you give something and expect nothing in return. But if you give something, expect nothing in return, and it's anonymous, you are like, that is like the ultimate gift, right? You're not looking to be acknowledged in any way.
Right.
It's completely disconnected from even who the source of the gift was, versus like, you give something and it's like, well, I want to be recognized. Or then I'm giving you something and you're saying, well, now what are you going to give me?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it might be informal or formal. And so I think, this notion of how we care in community for each other, and I think for the people that are, investing in the farm and supporting the work that we're doing, is because they see also how, they're investing in donating and supporting and giving to us, knowing that we're giving to others, right? It's kind of like also a channel for redistributing and supporting the work that we're doing, whether it's making, access to the food, access to, educational and program opportunities. But obviously in giving, we receive, right?
Yeah, it's great, man. I love it. I love what you all are doing. Well, Javier, I wanted to, before we wrap it up, I wanted to ask, I think there's been lots of tangible stuff so far, but we like to kind of close with some sort of a challenge to our listeners. And that can be, whatever, you feel pulled to share. But do you have any sort of like tips or challenge? It can be about pulling back from tech or about whatever, engaging in nature, whatever you want to share.
Yeah, I think maybe a challenge would, and which I think we're all challenged by this. But one of the things that I guess I try to do in whatever I'm doing is just be really present in the moment, and that can be much harder than it sounds.
Yeah.
If I'm here talking with you, I'm here and I'm focused on this conversation. If I'm with my kids, it's with my kids. If I'm with my wife, it's like, if it's with somebody on my team, I'm focused on, attentive to what's going on there. If it's somebody in the community, if it's a task, and, it kind of goes from that like Buddhist kind of focus mentality of, whatever you're doing, just do it well. If you're sweeping the floor, do a good job.
Yeah.
And just be present in that task. And no task is so unworthy that it can't be done well.
I love it. Thank you. Yeah. So definitely, yeah, easier said than done, but I think it's such an important thing, especially with our devices and gadgets in this day and age that are actively trying to pull us in multiple directions.
Constantly. Even with my own kids, I'll be honest, it's like talking like, hey, we're having conversations, so you really need to like put that away.
Yeah.
And that's hard, but like, why can't I talk to you and do this at the same time? It's like,
Yeah. Well, awesome, man. Javier, thank you so much for being here. Can you share, where can people find out more information about Coastal Roots Farm? Can you share the website and are there any events coming up that you want to share about?
Yeah. So Coastal Roots Farm, our website, coastalrootsfarm.org. We have all of our information there, from about the farm stand to our programs and offerings and upcoming events. In terms of what's upcoming this fall, we do have some of those workshops and so on that I just talked about. We just had one of our farm film and music series events last night, partnering with Olivewood Gardens and showing their Kitchenista film. We will be looking to bring more of those online, probably after the winter. The next big event is Tu B'Shvat, which is coming up in January, and that's our Sukkot Harvest Festival in September, October, and then Tu B'Shvat are our two largest agricultural festivals of the year. And that's up near our food forest, and we'll be kind of showcasing our full build out of our farm STEM science lab and teaching kitchen. And it's just going to be an awesome opportunity for people to come experience the farm as a family. And again, that'll be up on the website, but it is in January. And we'll also be putting out there, and just to kind of give a plug, this fall we'll be having our kind of end of year appeal in terms of where people can also join in to support all that we're doing, through both the food and the programming. And that information will also be going out. Really, if people want to know what's going on, the best thing to do is website, bottom, add your name and email, and you'll get regular updates of everything going on the farm. As well as, I mentioned it before, actually, something super exciting is going to be the opening of that new nature play space.
Yeah, very cool. Yeah.
Right? So it's not an event, but it's more than an event, because it's something that's going to be open, on a weekly basis at certain days, certain times, and then we'll expand based on how that goes. But we're definitely going to soft open and pilot first.
Cool. Yeah, and then I will include, of course, the website links and anything else on the show notes, so listeners can access it at the show notes. Well, awesome, Javier. Thank you so much for your time. I know you have a lot going on. Nature Play Center is, you got to get that up and running. A lot of events. So I really appreciate you taking the time to be here.
My pleasure. Thank you. And let me know when you want to come out. I feel like I need to give the two of you a updated tour. I think you're going to be excited.
Yeah, I'm pumped for Nature Play and to see all the updates. So we'll definitely follow up with you on that. All right. Well, thank you so much for tuning into the Nature Unplugged podcast. You can find our episodes on Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, Spotify, basically wherever you want to listen to a podcast. Be sure and visit natureunplugged.com for more information and resources, including the show notes that I mentioned, where you can find out there'll be the Coastal Roots Farm website and all those links as well. Awesome. Well, thanks so much for listening, and we will catch you next time.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sebastian.
Things change like seasons out of our control. If you think you should go, I will let you go.